Alright, so this is Manuel Alejandro Robles, um, his work from Level Up, and I'm just going to do a comment and critique on it. So the first thing that I would say right off the bat is that you really want to pay attention to your your perspective. And so what I mean by that is um, you've got the line going from the horizon like this, but then this roof sets back here like so. Actually, let me do these on a new layer here. So you're basically getting this perspective like so. And I get you're trying to work on kind of this aspect of how do I want to put it, um, scale type of thing. But the problem is your horizon is off, so it's kind of looking kind of odd. So that's the first issue that I would say. What I would do is transform these so that they're more even and move them up a little bit, and I think that'll give you a better horizon line type of thing. The next thing I would tell you to do right off the bat is look at your general construction. You started building this house and you had this idea and you just kept uh, going up and up and up with it, and which is fine. But to be honest with you, this is a typical um, this is the typical. I see this in students all the time. You just build stack on stack on stack, and in all reality, what you want to do is pay attention to your height and scale. So an example is you've got this guy standing next to the doorway. The problem with that is the doorway is twice his height. I would scale him up to about here, like so. And then this guy, if he's closer, you can scale him up too. And that makes a huge difference. The other aspect is as you get higher, so this doorway here is as tall as this window here, which is smaller even than this setup. So basically, you've went from maybe a 20-foot ceiling to a 40-foot ceiling to a 60-foot ceiling, and that kind of needs to be paid attention to as well. I think he did a decent job on the background and for just a general rough tree background. I do like the tree highlights that you're doing and the veins and stuff like that, and I think that works well. I think it's the tree itself that needs, or the building itself that needs much more adjustment. And so what I mean by that is you've got the style of a Japanese, typical Japanese temple, not house, temple. Okay, so and you want to look like you're adding stuff to it and things like that. And I get that, but think about how buildings are constructed, especially for the era that you're going for. With this, you've got the rivets going up and down, so you're trying to do this as like one of the old style houses, Tudor they call them. And so if that's the case, a lot of these houses had just kind of weird construction going on. So what I would do is um, actually what I would do is really look at how things are constructed. So in this kind of reality, what I would do is I would grab this and I would actually stretch that over like so. And then what you can do is you want to, instead of building these additional roofs on there, a lot of Tudor houses, they were just built straight up, and they were built with just dark big beams and things like that. So what I would actually do when you're doing this is I would actually construct the house much more lengthwise, and give it the idea that there's your doorway type of thing. Um, and then this goes back, and if you want that built up look, just build up on it, like so. And then maybe even, there's a second roof over the second building over here that's a little bit smaller. Um, and it builds up. And I'm just kind of working with your perspective. And basically, you want to just, like, if this is a tower, build smaller pieces. Don't build everything centered, because honestly, centered is kind of a boring sketch. Whereas if you build it like this, and maybe even, because a lot of the Tudor houses had things built out, and you could build in like a back row here, put in maybe, the corner roofs, things like that. Maybe get a little bit of more of a kind of a square roof, depending on how you want to build it. But build that stuff in as not just a stacking box, but as a kind of whole themed um, house. Don't just put it as this. Um, don't just put it as this. Individual. One tier stacked on top of each other house. Then when you start getting into this, I know this is a just kind of a sketch, and you're saying this is a cabin in the woods, but on all reality, it's not a cabin. It's just bigger than that. So then, if you're going to go bigger, look at things like putting um, a stable here for horses. You can have your little fence here, and that's going to add depth to the house a little bit more. Also, if you're going to have something like this on the back, then make sure it lines up with everything. Whereas now what you've got is you've got kind of this building here. You've got this building here that it's almost a story and a half. So is it a barn, or is it a shed, or is it an addition to the house? So get, and then use repeated shapes. So what I would do in this case, so what I would do for repeated shapes, I'm just going to grab, and we're just going to copy this over. Oops. Before I do that, let's copy it, transform. So I'm just going to move this over and scale it down a little bit, still kind of keeping that perspective. And then on that, I can erase some of this off. And we're just going to kind of put this in the background here and kind of erase some of that. And then what I would do is, when you start getting that in there, and then also like go in here and go in here and kind of start cleaning up some of this. And then if you're going to add in like this hooded doorway element here, that's fine, but keep it consistent. Put in a couple of these doorways here, here, and here, and that again changes your elements. If you're looking at doing a little bit different elements in there, focus on the elements themselves. So if this is like, I don't know if you want this as a highlight, or if you are looking at this as more of like a snow type of thing. It's really hard to tell, because if you're going with this nice bright light, the problem is you'd see some of this light, some of the roof and stuff fade over it too, because not all your tree cover is going to go over there. That type of thing. The other aspect is, um, get foreground, middle ground, and background in there. All right. So like here you have, your guy that we talked about earlier. So you have your guy that you talked about earlier, maybe another one standing here. Well, then put another guy up here, and walking towards it. that type of thing. And it doesn't even, have to be, and you can just use a little bit of that light to draw that character back into that space. Um, and don't be afraid to grab in some of the highlights and things like that, change, get a little bit more colors in there and stuff like that. And then think about how these old houses as well, think about, they're heated with basic chimneys and stuff. So don't be afraid to add a couple in there, putting in, the way these chimneys worked were essentially these chimneys, basically, just something like that. And we'll grab some of this darker green here, and you can build this stuff up. And if you want to look like a little bit more active, don't be afraid to add just a little bit of smoke type of thing, and that's going to give you a sense of flow for the wind and stuff like that. So those are kind of things that I would work on. Get your perspective down a little bit more, and then before you start these paintings, get some architecture styles that you have in mind. Where like you started here with some of the styles, but the problem is you didn't really measure out the scale of it. So essentially, these just got taller and taller and taller. And instead, what you want to do is measure that scale. So, all right, I hope that helps.